Well, welcome back, everybody. It's Tom Christie back in the workshop, and this will be session 2 of carving a Drake Greater Scaup bluebill in kind of a tucked head position. In the last session, we got the head roughed out. If you haven't seen that, you can refer to it. And in this session, we're going to work on the bill details, install the eyes. We'll see how far we get. I want to keep these videos reasonable length and go a piece at a time. If you're enjoying my channel and getting value out of it, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Many of you have done that. I really appreciate it. It does help me out, but it doesn't cost anything as I continue to build this channel with resources for decoy and wildfowl carvers. So let's get working on the head. Welcome back. I've done a little layout work for the nail and these structures on the front of the bill. The first thing I want to do though is put a little bit of a concaved area here against the cheek to allow this to be raised or higher than the surrounding area. So we'll go in and grind a little depression there, and what that's for is I don't know if you can see that in the video, but there's definitely a flare out here, and then these two little ridges protrude. So we want to give ourselves a little bit of structure there to create that ridge, and then we can put the separation in here later. I'm going to use this little bullet-shaped ruby bit and follow that pencil guideline and just kind of run along the edge of the bill here. And I want to take material out where I had marked that little X. So I'm leaving that ridge high right along the edge of the bill and taking a little material out above that area on both sides, and then going back and rounding that so we have a nice soft ridge down there to work with. And then I'm fairing that into the remainder of the bill so it looks natural. Same thing here, following that pencil guideline, a little better view here. Taking that material out right above that ridge and smoothing it into the remainder of the bill, and then rounding the ridge a little bit. And this rounded point of this bullet-nosed ruby bit is good for this purpose. And then I'm cleaning up the edge as it meets the face there and the cheek. Now I'm going to use a little bit of sandpaper and sand everything smooth that we've done so far. So we have a nice smooth ridge along the edge. Now I'm going to move to this very small cylindrical ruby, and I'm going to use that to cut in the nail here. So I'm just doing an outline first, creating a little groove around the nail and also around these ridges on the outer edge of the upper mandible here. And follow your reference materials. Hopefully you have a study bill. They're just invaluable to help you get this type of detail accurate. You know, pictures only get you so far. It's so valuable to be able to hold something three-dimensional and take a look at it from all angles. So now I'm rounding the edges of those grooves a little bit on the nail and also on those ridges on the edge. I'm removing a little material there from the upper mandible. When you look down on the bill, you want to be able to see those ridges on either side, like that. So doing the same thing on this side. And it takes a while to work this, to clean everything up and remove grinding marks and try to get it as smooth as you can before you move to sanding. I'm just making that groove a little deeper. Make it a little more defined, and then rounding the edge of the mandible. I'm showing this whole sequence just to convey sometimes the editing makes everything look easy, and some of this detail just takes time. So I thought I would show the entire video here of me working these details on the end of the bill, because you have to go back and forth, and I'm going to get the pencil out and pencil those in so that I can take a look at symmetry. It makes it a little easier to see that. And then I'm going to fold up a piece of sandpaper and use that as a tool to do some sanding around those ridges and smooth everything out. And that takes some time as well. See, I'm just using the corner of that to go in that groove and help get a nice blend. This is a little mandible or a mandrel that I use that holds a ruby bit. And I think they call this a pen vise on Amazon. But these are really handy. I put a flame shape in one side and a little ball shape in the other side. And I use this tool all of the time for this type of just handwork. And it makes it quick work to go back and forth between the two shapes. So I'll work that and get it finished up. Okay, I've got that sanded. Now I'm going back to this ridge, and I want to put this small ridge on the edge. So it's kind of two parallel ridges we end up with here on the edge of the upper mandible. And I'm going to use my knife to carefully score a line. This doesn't have to be very deep. It just gives the grinding bit a guide as we're grinding this groove into the upper mandible. And that fades out as it goes to the front of the bill. Now I'm going to use this very small cylinder and use the edge of that to follow that scored line that I put in place with the knife. And again, I don't have to go very deep, but this will take multiple passes to make sure I get a nice clean groove here from the front of the bill back. So it takes a real light touch here because this is very delicate work. And again, I'm showing the whole video rather than cutting this short. I just wanted you to see how much time I spend on creating that particular detail. Now I'm going to fold up a piece of 250 grit sandpaper and just use the edge of that, the point of it, as a tool to go in and sand everything smooth around that groove. And just clean everything up, both directions. Once that's done, I'm going to get my center line re-penciled in here as we work on the nostrils. And I want to get some dimensions here. The width of the nostrils from side to side is about 1/2 inch. So I want to give myself a guideline on the carving. 1/4 inch each side of the center line. Just to keep that in mind, they're pretty wide set on a diver like this, and so that's an important dimension. Now I'm going to use my study bill and my dividers and get a dimension from the tip of the notch there to where the nostril enclosure starts. And then I also want a dimension of the length of the nostril enclosure. I'm putting a little dot in place, and now I can pencil those in. And looking at the shape, it's kind of like an almond shape. And using the pencil to put those in place before I start grinding, I can look at symmetry and make sure they're positioned correctly from the front, side to side. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm just looking at some of the details. The nostril enclosures are almost vertical, and the nostril opening itself comes in from the side. So we're going to want to carve that in that fashion. So now I'm using this small cylindrical bit to outline. And since I want these nostrils to lie almost in a vertical position, I'm going to dig in more down below so that I can line these nostril enclosures up in kind of a vertical alignment. I got off screen there, but I'm basically just outlining those enclosures and rounding them, and then taking that lower section deeper so they're more vertical in their orientation. Cutting that in fairly deep, then rounding the area back into the bill. And then rounding the nostril enclosure itself. So this will take a little time and work. I'll work on these and get them cleaned up. And now I'm going to switch to the flame-shaped ruby bit. It has a nice point on it, and so you can really get in and clean up some of these areas that are hard to reach. And I use the side of this bit to just smooth everything out. You can see I'm using the point of the bit to kind of redefine the lower edge of that enclosure. And then blend out. Digging in. Again, I want these to be more up and down than out at a 45-degree angle. So I'm removing material from the lower edge of the nostril enclosure so that we're kind of at that half-inch width between the nostrils from the top down. I just want to stop and take a quick look at my reference and see if I'm in the ballpark. There's a little bit of a central ridge here. It's very subtle, but then it flares out towards the tip, kind of in this direction. Just checking that again, but it's a very subtle little ridge between the nostrils that flares out before it reaches the tip of the bill. So I want to grind that detail in. I'm going to use this little cone-shaped or bullet-shaped ruby and just very gently remove material, leave that ridge high, but create that little bit of bill structure that I see in the study bill. And then those kind of fade out as they reach the end of the bill. Now I'm just going to use this bit to kind of clean everything up and just make sure everything looks smooth before we do some hand sanding. And now I'll just spend quite a bit of time doing some hand sanding, softening everything, cleaning it up. Now I want to install the nostrils themselves. I'm getting a reference dimension from the study bill with my dividers. And I want to get the length of the nostril opening itself and pencil that in. I like to use the pencil in this case before I carve because it's easy to see the nostrils this way and make sure they look symmetrical and that I don't have one below the other or one longer than the other. And now I'll switch to this very small ruby ball. And this is a great bit for nostrils. It's just the right size. And I'm just going to go in here and open those up a bit. And they're kind of oblong nostrils. And they crowd the front of the nostril enclosure itself. So a little sanding, and then I'm going to pencil those in again so that I can see them. So I like to darken the nostrils and then check my symmetry again. A lot of this is repeat, but this is the detail that makes a difference in my opinion. And then I'll just do some more sanding with 250 grit sandpaper. Now I'm going to use my embossing tool and just press in a few wrinkles coming out in this location and a few coming out from the end of the nostril enclosure here, kind of radially. It'll be hard to see in the video. I'm going to put a few coming out of the nail here, back in this direction. Pretty subtle, but helps convey life in the bill. And then the nostril over here. And down here. Just a few, and then I'll work those to make sure they're nice and soft, so there's not a hard ridge on any of those. And you do that just by going back and forth and kind of burnishing the wrinkle a bit. And that's about all I'm going to do on that bill. All right, here's what I use for eye installation. Number one, I've got some Drake Scaup eyes from Michael Braun. That's MRB Decoys. If you haven't seen Michael's eyes, they're really high quality. I like what he's doing, so we'll use his eyes. I've got my pattern. I need some dividers. Got a circle template, a pencil, some paint brushes to manipulate the epoxy sculpt, which is a two-part epoxy water base that I'm going to use for the eye installation, and some water to smooth things out. I also use a little gouge, and I'll go through each one of these as we prepare to set the eyes. I do want to spend some time on this because I think eye set is so critical to conveying life in your decoy. If you get the eye set in the wrong position, it just sticks out like a sore thumb. And you really lose the essence of the species that you're trying to duplicate. So I've got my dividers, and I take a measurement from the tip of the bill here to the front of the eye and transfer that to the carving. And symmetry is really important in eye setting. So we want that to look the same from both sides. And then I use a circle template. And this is a 10 millimeter eye. So I'm going to get that lined up, get a good sharp pencil. Pencil that in on both sides, and then we're going to check symmetry from the front before we do anything else. So I've got those roughly positioned. Now I just take a look from the front, and with the penciled marks you can see if one is lower than the other, which is critical that it not be, and this one is definitely lower the way I've penciled it in. So I'm going to make an adjustment, and that happens, it seems like to me, more times than not. So it's really hard to get those positioned exactly the same on both sides. Even though I have a drilled straight hole through, I've mentioned that before. I do the final positioning of the eyes after the carving has been done, because there are things going on in the shapes that impact things. That looks much better. Now I'm going to use my little 1/4 inch gouge and very carefully go in and go around each eye. Some people use an eye hole drill, the proper size for this purpose. I just started using the gouge, and like a lot of things, you get comfortable with a certain approach. I see no reason to change. So I've got those, and then just pop that out. I'll do that on the other side, and then we'll get ready to set the eyes. All right, I've got the two-part epoxy mixed up, and you need to knead that very well so it's consistent color. And now I'm going to take some water on an old brush that I use for this purpose and dampen the socket and the surrounding area. And then I'm going to take the epoxy sculpt and push that in place and set that extra aside. And then I'm going to crowd the front of the hole because that's where my reference dimension was taken, and pushing the eye in place. And I want a little forward cant and a little downward cant in the eye like they are in the actual bird. And I'm looking from the front because I still want to be able to see a little bit of the eye from the front. Now I'm going to take a little extra epoxy sculpt and kind of press that in place above and below the eye so that I have enough material to work with. Now I'm going to take water on a finger and begin to smooth that out. And we want to get rid of any ridges and blend that into the surrounding wood. I'm not worried too much about covering the eye up right now. I just want to get a nice smooth transition going. Above and below the eye. Blend that in, because when we're done, we don't want any ridges. That's a kind of a rookie mistake that I've made many times, is not spending enough time working on this blend. And after the decoy is painted, you can see a big blob of filler, and it really takes away from the liveliness of the bird to see that filler around the eye. So I just encourage you to take some time and work this in really well. And I like the epoxy sculpt because it is water-based, and it's easy to work with. Now I've got an old brush that's full of epoxy, but it's kind of a nice rounded shape, and I'm going to use that to begin to open up the eye. And just, you can use sculpting tools for this, whatever you have that works. So I'm kind of opening the eye up, and then I'm going to press the material again and manipulate it out away from the eye. Begin to leave that eye opened up. And I'm trying to develop that nice almond shape to the eye. We want to make sure we leave the eye channel here in front of the eye so that from the front the eye is still visible, and so that if this was a bird, he could see down the line of his bill there. I'll switch to a different brush and just kind of do a little more shaping of the eye. You can do some final shaping after the epoxy sculpt has set. That's another thing I like about epoxy sculpt. I'm not repping for them. I don't get any commissions for saying that. It's just nice product and it works well for this purpose. So I'll spend some time smoothing everything out, like I said before, not leaving any ridges and getting the eye opened up to where I feel it looks right. But that kind of gives you the process I use for eye set. And I'll be back when I get the other eye in place. All right, I've got those eyes set, and we'll let that cure overnight, and then we can use an X-Acto and do some final shaping of the eye opening itself. Now I want to do some general rough rounding of the bird, and I don't need too many details on the bird, but I pencil in where the primaries are going to be. These are going to be crossed primaries, so as I'm rounding, I don't want to take off too much wood there. The other thing I need to get positioned is the tail, because I'm going to want to shape that up as well. This particular bird has his tail right on the water, like a lot of divers do. I'm going to use my dividers and get a dimension to the top of the tail where it meets the body there. Just transfer that over on both sides. And then I can pencil in where that tail is going to be so I can get it shaped up. And I'm going to leave about 1/4 of an inch thickness, because the category that this will compete in requires sturdiness, like a hunting decoy, even though it's going to be a little more decorative paint job. Kind of the IWCA style bird, a little fancier bird, where detailed painting is allowed. Okay, that's about all I need, and now we'll just do some general rounding, get the bird shaped up, and then we can do some of the layout work of the side pockets, the cape, things like that. Now I'm going to use my 3/4 inch round-nosed burr and just begin rounding things in general. So we've gotten some of that work done with the bandsaw. This is just getting a nice round shape to the body of the decoy. And I'm also going to be rounding the front here, where the breast meets the sides. And there's quite a bit of video here, so I am going to speed this up to 2 times speed so we can get through it quicker, but we can see more video that way in the same amount of time. Just be aware that I am speeding up the video, because I've said before, when you're using a burr, you really have to use a lot of caution. All right, this is a 2 times speed. A lot of this is duplicate, so there's very little value in watching me do this over the entire bird. Just know that I'm rounding things out. I don't want to lose the top-down profile pattern, so I'm not going to grind away kind of the center line of the side pockets there, but I'm going to round the breast area. I'm going to round the side pocket areas. And once I get that done, we'll do a little bit of work on the primaries and the tail. So I'm going to jump ahead to that. So I've kind of got the body rounded the way I want it. Now I want to start removing material from the primaries very carefully. I'm going against the grain here, so you really need to go pretty gently with a burr. I know I say that all the time, but I can't say it enough. You know, these are power tools and they can be dangerous, so you have to be careful. Keep your hands away from the burr at all times. So I'm just starting to form the tail. You can see I've removed material from one side of the primaries there, and I'm going to do that on the other side here. This burr does have crossed primaries, so I have to leave material back here to do the carving on those primaries. But I'm basically just trying to get material out of the way here so that I can do more detailed carving later. And this burr really makes quick work of kind of hogging off material. Again, I'm starting to define the upper side of the tail here. And I've given myself the guidelines. I want about 1/4 inch thickness on the tail back there. Now that I've kind of got the primaries in rough location shaped up, I'm going to round everything further. And now I'm going to switch to this 1/4 inch burr. And again, I'm at 2 times speed here, so you'll be grinding slower than this, but I'm going to remove this material between the primaries with this 1/4 inch cylindrical burr and just take a little bit at a time, and it's pretty quick work. Now I'm going to begin to separate the 2 primary feather groups where they cross. So we need to lower this group that's tucked under the other group and put an angle on this upper primary group as they angle down into the side pockets, kind of like that. Now let's work to define the underside of the tail. I'm going to use that cylindrical burr and just carefully remove the material below the tail and create that rump area that meets up with the lower edge of the tail down below. Okay, I've got the rough rounding done, and I just want to give you a view of that. You can see it's nice round from the back side. Got the primaries kind of located, and just remember there's an angle down and into this side pocket on this primary group, and an angle down and into this side pocket on this primary group. A common mistake that I see in competitions is these angles don't make sense. For instance, if I would have carved this over like this, that wing is going to be way out here on the decoy. If we carve it too much like this, it's like the wing is clear up here. So keep in mind the structure of the bird, and I get that wrong every once in a while too, but this should be a nice continuous line down with the wing somewhere in this area tucked in to the side pocket. So just a little anatomy. That wing angle really needs to be correct, as well as the levels here. It's easy to get this level wrong, and the wing would end up somewhere outside the body and outside of the body experience, which we don't want. Okay, enough bad humor. Now I want to do a little bit of layout work, and I'm going to locate the cape here with my dividers, and I'm going to use the edge of my booth here as a vertical to just transfer that to the carving. Switch back over here. Now I'm going to get a dimension from the back of the cape there to where these tuck in front. I'm going to go from that line and strike an arc across on both sides, and then get a dimension from my center line out, and where that meets that arc is the point that I'm interested in here on both sides. So then we can sketch in the cape here. Now I want to get my side pockets in, and I've got my calipers here, dimension from the bottom of the decoy to the top of the side pocket. I know where the back of the side pocket is from maintaining that from my pattern. Now it ducks down here as it reaches the front. So this is kind of the lowest point. And I'm just leaving a little indentation there. And then it raises back up a bit here. Like that. Then I want to use my top-down pattern. Go from the center line. Normally kind of in the middle of the cape back here is the widest point out here. So from the center line, get a dimension there. And then in back as well, the top of the side pocket from the center line. It pulls in quite a bit. And then that meets up with this line back here. I wanted to show you that process. I'm actually going to change a few things because I want to carve this bird with a little bit of wing out on one side, and I want to drop the side pockets a bit on both sides so that we can expose some of this beautiful speculum. But if I was just doing a traditional, that's the approach, and this is the wood we need to remove. But I went ahead and penciled that on so that I kind of know where the side pockets would be. And there's a return down here, like this. And then I can do some layout work with the bird that I want to carve, which is with this wing out. I've kind of sketched that in quickly, but not too far off there. I want that to go down, not to the water line, but just above it. And then I'm going to have some of the side pocket showing here, but it's going to be dropped down a bit so that this wing and speculum can be out on this side. So I'll do a little bit more layout work to get that where I want it. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to drop the side pocket a little bit in this area so that I can expose some of the speculum over here. Very rough, but that's the general idea. All right, well, that seems like a good place to end session 2 of carving the Drake Greater Scaup. We've got the head details added, the eyes installed. I'm going to let that epoxy sculpt cure overnight. We've got the body rough shaped, and in session 3, we'll really go about carving the details on the body and probably get the decoy split, hollowed out, and reassembled for flotation. Until next time, Tom Christie signing out. Good carving to all of you out there.